Bulldogs, anytime you see this symbol, we are talking about a firewall. Whether it's on a network map, a practice exam, the real thing, doesn't matter. This is the universal symbol for a firewall, but as you'd expect, just as not all computers are alike, not all routers have the same capabilities, not all switches have the same capabilities, that is certainly true of our firewalls. So we're going to be spending quite a bit of time here talking about some different types of firewalls. We definitely have some lab work coming up as well, but there's some terminology we need to be very, very clear on for our CCNA security exam. The first question I want to answer, though, pops up every once in a while. Why is this a symbol for a firewall? You know, you see all these other logical symbols on a map, and then all of a sudden you see a pile of bricks. And the thing is, you don't really hear the term firewall that often when it refers to a physical firewall, say in a home or a business. But that's actually where the term comes from. There were physical firewalls long before there were logical ones. And actually, this used to be a big selling point or a big marketing point when it came to hotels. Now, we don't think about it that often today. We don't walk into a hotel and say, hey, is this place fireproof? You know, do you have firewalls? What's going on here? But back in the day, say even in the 1920s, 1930s, that was a big selling point for hotels because there had been some tragedies involving hotels that basically, one cinder and the whole place went up. The reason I mention this, just something quick I want to share here with you. I live in Richmond, Virginia today. I've lived here most of my life, but I was actually born in Danville, Virginia, which is really a mill town, or was a mill town at the time, a big textile mill town. And the reason I mention it is that, you had your typical small town, downtown, and there was a hotel there called the Hotel Danville. And I would see it, and the odd thing is that it had Hotel Danville, painted on the side of the building, as buildings did then, as businesses did then. And I distinctly remember seeing Hotel Danville fireproof. And even as a kid, I was kind of inquisitive. Like I said, we moved when I was 7, so I didn't see the building a lot. But every time I did see it, I would think, aren't all hotels fireproof? And of course, when they painted that on the side of the wall, not all of them were. And I just wanted to share with you quickly, when I looked that up, I actually found a postcard for the Hotel Danville, and I bought that. Here's the best scan I could do of it. And you see, bigger than modern, bigger than good food, bigger than air-conditioned coffee shop, and they have their own garage. Fireproof is the big marketing deal there. And also, before the building was finally changed names, it actually still stands in Danville. Check this out. I love this stuff. This is just a personal hobby of mine, is what they call it ghost art, where old ads on the side of buildings have faded. But the Hotel Danville was still there the last time I was there, and you can clearly see fireproof where I remembered it as a child. So the memory has not yet faded. Anyway, there is a firewall actually on the screen, a physical firewall. Obviously, we're a little more interested in logical ones, so let's move on from that and move on to this. Because whether it's a device dedicated to acting as a firewall or a device that is acting as a firewall in addition to other duties, the main purpose of a firewall really is twofold. First, we want to stop traffic that has been deemed dangerous or suspicious, perhaps, from entering a given area. And that area can be as large as your entire internal network or as small as a single subnet on your internal network. Also, of course, the key here. We want to stop the bad traffic, but what's the other thing we got to do? We got to keep the good traffic flowing. We've got to allow desirable traffic to flow normally while keeping an eye on it, because, you can have a desirable traffic flow become a non-desirable traffic flow, and that's something that we as network admins have to be aware of. Now, this term defense in depth, firewalls should be part of what we call a defense in depth network security strategy. And what happens here is your firewall is part of a layered defense against attackers. You don't want a single point of network defense where if someone gets through the router that's the entry point to your network, hey, they're in and there's no other defenses. That's really as undesirable as the dreaded single point of network failure, where if one thing goes wrong in your network, everything's down. So again, we want firewalls to be part of our strategy, not all of our strategy. And the term we use there is defense in depth. We want some defenses behind the initial defenses. If you just build a wall, as some countries have found and some militaries have found over the years, once you get past that wall, then there are no other defenses. We don't want that in our network. Now, we have to be sure, of course, to have our security policies in writing when it comes not just to your firewalls, but your network security policies, period. Always a good idea, and most companies today, if not all, really require that kind of thing. Now, your overall network security strategy, it cannot be static. And your firewall policy shouldn't be either. I'm going to get up on the old virtual soapbox here for a minute because I know businesses that do that. You know, they'll spend the money and they'll get those initial defenses set up, and then they won't update things or they won't stay on top of the latest attacks. Straying away from firewalls for a moment, that goes for antivirus software. When is the best time to install an antivirus product update? When the update comes out, right? You don't want to go back, you really want them put on automatically, or perhaps for you to be prompted, hey, do you want to install this now? But, you want the latest updates when the latest updates are available. And we have to keep our firewalls up like that as well. It's not a static situation where we put something in and then just walk away and never look at it again. Now, whether we're discussing a corporate network firewall or a firewall for your home, the pros of having a firewall far outweigh the cons. I hate to even call them cons, but you got your pros, so you got to have your cons. Now, the pros, of course, we want to stop unauthorized users from accessing our network. Less obvious, though. We want to stop viruses, malware, Trojan horses, and the like. We want to stop as much of that as we can at that network entry point, because it's a lot easier on the hardware and the software and the humans when we stop such attacks at the perimeter of our network instead of having to fight them once they're in. Because once they're in, even if we detect them and knock them out, almost immediately, perhaps some damage has already been done. Now, we also want to prevent users who are authorized to access the network from accessing sensitive data, especially medical and financial records. If you're working for a network with medical records, you know how important that is. I'm certainly not downplaying keeping financial records separate, but boy, those medical records, once they get breached, you're open to all kinds of nasty lawsuits. We also want to prevent potential attackers from gathering seemingly innocent info, say the IP address scheme of our internal network, via recon attacks. Maybe we want to hide that as well, and we can do that with a firewall. Now, the cons, again, I don't want to be too harsh on it. You don't want to look at these things and say, oh, okay, I'm not putting in a firewall. But the cons tend to happen at the very beginning of your firewall install. If you've ever put one in, or if you've ever changed anything in your network, you know what can happen. All of a sudden you do that over the weekend, and then you're Monday morning and you're kind of dreading answering the phone, right? Let's just be realistic here, because you're thinking, okay, Sam's not going to be able to use that wacky app he's got or whatever. So the thing is, you got to fine tune things, because you will have people coming to you saying, hey, this application, doesn't work, or, I can't connect to X now. So there's always going to be some fine tuning. And of course, we got to allow all the legitimate data to flow through the firewall. I know that's obvious, but I'm telling you anyway. We've got to make sure that all legitimate users can access the data they need while preventing them from accessing the data they shouldn't be able to access. And of course, allowing apps to work as they did before the firewall install. Now, before we go to that next screen, the thing I wanted to mention here was something Cisco has in Cisco Configuration Professional called one-step lockdown. Hey, that sounds great. It's a security feature for a router or switch, and you're just thinking, hey, I don't have to, configure stuff individually. I'll just press the one-step lockdown button and it will be locked down. Boy, will it. It's going to be so locked down that it practically cannot do its job. So features like that, Cisco or otherwise, just be wary of them. Because you will be doing some fine-tuning if you ever just hit one button and say, okay, I want this switch totally protected or that router totally protected. You'll be lucky if it's able to do anything after that. So fine-tuning, just a part of the job. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, the term firewall, it's a very general term. And on our CCNA security exam, we should expect to be asked some less than general questions about specific types of firewalls. That's particularly true of stateless firewalling and stateful firewalling. We'll take a detailed look at both of those in the next video. See you there.